The Pentagon has announced a plan to increase production of shells six-fold in 2 years, the New York Times reported. This is an unprecedented pace. Not even during the Korean War has so much ammunition been produced. The reason is Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This war has shown that the barrel artillery is of great importance in conflicts of such intensity. Thus, the New York Times writes, the United States is consolidating its support for Ukraine no matter how long the war lasts.
The Defense Department will fund new facilities to make artillery ammunition and is spending roughly $1 billion a year over the next 15 years to modernize government-owned ordnance production facilities in an effort to increase automation, improve worker safety, and ultimately make munitions more quickly. Just since August, Congress has allocated $1.9 billion to the Army for the effort, from an article of the New York Times.
Another important signal was the supply of Abrams tanks. This was reported by Sky News on January 24th, citing an unnamed official of the Department of Defense. The next day, Berlin agreed to transfer Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine. They stated that they would deliver the military equipment only in synchronization with Washington.
I'm announcing that the United States will be sending 31 Abrams tanks to Ukraine, the equivalent of 1 Ukrainian battalion. Secretary Austin has recommended this step because it will enhance the Ukraine's capacity to defend its territory and achieve its strategic objectives. The Abrams tanks are the most capable tanks in the world. They're also extremely complex to operate and maintain. So we're also giving Ukraine the parts and equipment necessary to effectively sustain these tanks on the battlefield. And we'll begin to train the Ukrainian troops on these issues of sustainment, logistics, and maintenance as soon as possible.
Earlier, at a meeting with Republican and Democrat leaders, U.S. President Joe Biden emphasized the importance of supporting Ukraine.
Foreign policy is we've united the West in a way that hadn't been in a while, including bringing in Japan and other Asian countries invested in Ukraine's future. And again, we're going to speak about continuing our support for Ukraine. And it's an idea that has bipartisan support, like some of what we passed had bipartisan support.
Russia reacted to the supply of Abrams in its usual manner. The ambassador of the Russian Federation in Washington called it a blatant provocation and said that all the tanks would be, quote, destroyed just like other NATO equipment. The ambassador did not say whether he meant that the Russian Ministry of Defense would once again draw fictitious figures of losses of weapons of the Ukrainian armed forces. The United States, meanwhile, has stepped up talks with Beijing to make sure that China will not actively support Russia in its criminal war against Ukraine. Washington believes that Moscow's international isolation is bringing the moment of its defeat in the war much closer.
So we're closely monitoring the situation as we have been since the war started. We will continue to communicate to China the implications of providing material support to Russia's war against Ukraine. We have talked about this many times, that we will, be very clear what it means to support Russia's aggression against Ukraine. And as I've said many times, as my colleagues from NSC has said many times, we will continue to support Ukraine and the Ukrainian people as long as needed.
All deliveries, and especially the use of U.S. military assistance by Ukraine, are carried out as transparently as possible. Not a single violation has been registered in the entire period of defense cooperation. Military aid remains strictly accountable. Reported by Serhiy Kulyas, Danilo Kobza, UATV News.